So I've struggled over the years with making bread. I've tried a number of recipes, and really bread's not all that difficult to make. It can be a little tedious, and so I found kind of a cheat, and I really love the results, and the family's crazy about it. It comes out like artisan bread. It's not the prettiest bread, but I think it's quite good. So you can look this up online. It's the New York Times no-knead bread recipe. It's been around for a number of years, and there are variations of it. But this is just the most straightforward way that I found to do it. It's really so simple. The biggest thing to know is that this works best if you have a fairly heavy Dutch oven, something that's got a heavy lid on it. And the reason for that is we bake the bread with the lid on the Dutch oven in the oven at a fairly high temperature. And the reason this bread turns out different from most other breads that we make at home in terms of the crust being really crispy is that having that heavy lid on the Dutch oven seals in the moisture that comes out of the bread as it bakes, so it essentially turns into its own steaming mechanism. So the first step is your flour. I like to use unbleached all-purpose. This is King Arthur. The only caveat is they have an end-user license agreement which says if you make bread with King Arthur flour, you can only serve it at a round table. Right, Sarah? Sarah's being silent. Okay, so 4 cups of flour. This is pretty simple. Just plop it in there. It doesn't have to be exact. You can do it with 3 cups because you're going to adjust the water according to kind of a line of sight. Just make kind of a best judgment. I like to use 4 cups because the family likes the recipe and it tends to go pretty quick. And it just always seems to work out well. Alright, the rest of this rather simple recipe. Key, yeast, not very much, only a half of a teaspoon. So this is a quarter and a quarter. And there's a half. You're going to see exactly how quickly this all comes together. So a teaspoon, so I'm going to use 2 teaspoons of salt. If you leave out the salt, bread will look just fine. Not going to taste very good. And 2 teaspoons. You can adjust that up or down, but a teaspoon and a half works out okay, but I do find the bread tends to be a little more bland. Alright, so take a cup out here, and we're just going to kind of mix this up. You can mix this whole thing by hand. This is really simple. You want to get these ingredients mixed together just a little bit. Not too difficult. And I'm going to use just tap water. It's basically about room temperature. Nothing fancy. Instead of stirring with my hands, I'm going to use a little stir. So here we go with a little warm water. Now, part of my difficulty with bread recipes has always been if I use the amount of water that they describe in the recipe, my bread comes out very, very dry. So I've learned basically to just do it by sight. So I'm adding in 3 cups of water at this point, and I'm going to stir this up, see where I'm at. Every week it varies a little bit. I don't know, maybe it's the humidity. Now what I'm getting here is a little stickier than I want, but you gotta squish it around a little bit. And this might be usable like this, but see, it's a little clumpy. I don't have all the flour in there yet, so I'm gonna adjust in just a little more water. And I like it with a little more water in it. So just a touch more, because what we want is sort of a shaggy, sticky dough, but we don't want it runny. So we're just going to kind of toss this around a little bit, get it mixed in. In the online interview I saw with the guy who invented this bread recipe, he literally just tossed it in there a couple of times and was done. This might be just a tad bit too sticky. So this is the way this goes, right? I'm doing this all kind of by eye. So I'm going to adjust in just a little more flour. As it turns out, making bread is not a precise science. At least not for me. It varies a little bit, and maybe that's part of the fun. It's sort of a magic thing. Bread, just a little flour, water, salt, and yeast, and you get something
magnificent at the end. So there we go, just kind of a nice shaggy sticky dough. And the nice thing is, after we've let it set for 24 hours, we can also adjust the consistency of it by kneading it. Now this is called a no-knead recipe. I cheat a little, I do knead it up just a tad bit. Now we've got a second container. Just gonna put a couple sprinkles of olive oil in there. Use a paper towel, my preferred way to do it. I'm just gonna spread that around, basically so that the dough doesn't stick as badly to the sides a day later when we take this out. And with that, we're going to transfer this in. And that's why I like having this, is, you know what, this dough is sticky. So I don't mind getting my hands messy, but there's a limit, right? It's as simple as that. And what we're going to do now is seal this up and let it sit for 18 to 24 hours, and then we'll continue on with the second half of the recipe. Okay, so sealing this up, this is pretty simple. I'm using aluminum foil because I like to get a good seal around this. I'm going to seal in the bread and the yeast, and I'm not sure exactly what the chemistry is here that goes on, but yeast seems to work best when there's a good seal on this bread. And with that, we have our initial work done. We're going to let this sit 18 to 24 hours. You can let it set a little longer. I find the fermentation makes the bread even better. You'll get a nice soft bread in the middle with aeration in it that is just superb. Alright, so now the bread is sat and in the container for about 24 hours, maybe just a couple hours over. And so we're going to take the lid off of this and prepare it and get it ready to rise for the final rising. So we're going to pop the lid off of this and I'll show you what we have. It's kind of an interesting consistency. You'll see there are a lot of air bubbles. It's pretty... This dough is probably going to take a little bit of work because it looks like maybe a little softer than we want. So I'm going to roll out a cutting board. I'm going to flour this bad boy up. Plenty of flour. Otherwise, the dough is going to stick. I'm going to grab a little Rubbermaid helper here. We're just going to take this bread dough, pull it out of here. Remember, we put some olive oil down in there yesterday. This is pretty gooey, so I think I got a little bit of work cut out for me here. And that's, maybe I don't really get the whole no-knead bread recipe because in reality I always knead it a little bit. So I'm going to cover this with a little bit of flour, and basically I'm just going to fold this over. I'm going to cover myself in some flour, and I'm just going to smooth this out. And it gets, when you smooth it out, you can feel kind of how sticky the dough may be. So I added just a little too much water at the earlier stage. And I'm going to flatten this out a tad bit, and then I'm going to fold it over. So I don't know if this is necessarily kneading, but what I'm looking to do here is keep working flour into this until the bread is no longer so sticky that it sticks to my hands. Like right here is a really sticky spot. So I'm just flouring this out, smoothing it out. I'm going to work it for a minute. I know this is cheating. We said this was a no-knead bread recipe, but I like it better. I think it works out a little better when I do it this way. I've tried it both ways, and this is the way I like to do it. Alright, so now we're working this into kind of a little ball, and at the point where you've kneaded enough flour in there that it's not sticking to your hands, you've got a pretty good batch of bread, and it works into basically like a button on the top of a mushroom you can see on the bottom here. And we'll flour this up a little bit, and we'll get ready to let this go through the final rising period. And I cheat up on this just a tad bit, I suppose. Normally you just put it on the counter. I actually roll out just a little bit of plastic wrap, stick this on the counter. Okay, like that. Now I have a cotton cloth. This is not a cloth that's gonna have lint in it because we're gonna let the bread rise in this, and you really don't want lint fuzz all over your bread. At least not normally. So I think this is cotton. I think they might even call this a bread cloth. We smooth that out. Now we've got a little bit of cornmeal. $1 at your local baker's. And we're going to actually rise the bread in here. So we roll out this cornmeal on here just to keep the bread from sticking to the cloth. Now I'm going to double up here. I'm going to add just a little bit of flour. The recipe doesn't call for this. This is the way I've figured out works best for me. And again, I'm going to make sure that the surface of the dough isn't sticky. And we're going to drop this right in the middle. Then we're going to fold this cloth over. We're going to leave a little bit of room for rising. So there's a bit of a margin right there between the edge of the cloth and the edge of the bread. So I like to leave about 1 inch. So we're going to fold that over. Now I'm going to take that plastic wrap. Actually, I'm going to take the foil from yesterday. Going to prop that over the top. And we're going to get kind of a seal on this. And we're going to take the plastic, get a bit more of a seal on it. I'm going to top it off with one more little piece of plastic. This doesn't look very neat, but there's no extra marks here for neatness. And there you go. So we're going to let that rest for 2 hours, and then we'll continue on with the next section of this. Okay. The oven's now preheated to 450 degrees, and we have one of our nice big Dutch ovens in there, and we preheat that at oven temperature for about 30 minutes. And here comes the next part of the trick with the no-knead bread. I'm going to bring the Dutch oven out. We're going to take the dough that's been rising for a little over 2 hours, and we're going to drop that in there. Now this Dutch oven is really, really hot. This particular Dutch oven, maybe 40 bucks. I bought it over at Baker's Supermarket. So you don't have to spend a lot. Alright, this has been rising. Let's see what we have. Be real careful not to get the plastic on the hot Dutch oven. And what we're going to find here is just a little blob of flour. And there we go. Now, there's no particular fancy technique here. It's going to look actually a little awkward, but it always works out. So if you remember, when we put the bread together, we kind of tucked it under, so it's like, looks like a mushroom button, and the bottom is kind of all tucked under, and that's the part that's going to face up, and that's the part that'll expand as the bread cooks. So we're just going to take this towel and we're going to drop it in there, and that's it. It's about as ceremonial as that. Now we'll take this, put it in the oven, 450 degrees for 30 minutes. In the Dutch oven, in the oven, for about 30 minutes. Now your times are going to vary a little bit. I've been cooking this actually for about 35 minutes at 450 degrees. What you want to do is remove the lid, and be careful about this. Don't do it all the time, because part of the trick to this bread is you're going to seal in the moisture, and it's going to steam the bread, giving it a great crust. So what we're going to see is a bread that's slightly browned. And at this point, I'm going to put it back in the oven, and we're going to cook, maintaining it at 450 degrees for about another 20 minutes, or until it's crispy golden brown. And your taste with regard to how brown you want it will vary a little bit. And in case you were wondering about it, no, I didn't oil or spray this pan. The bread just doesn't stick. Maybe it's the heat and the starch in the bread, but it's actually in there pretty loose. Okay, bread's gone through its second round without the lid for about 12 minutes. Again, your timing is going to vary. What we have is a very nicely browned loaf. I like the top a little bit dark so that the insides I know are going to be well cooked. You can see it definitely slides around inside of the pot. And with that, we're going to set it on the rack over here for about 20 minutes before we cut it, because it's very, very hot inside. And there you go. Alright, now the moment of truth. We're going to take a few sample slices of the bread using just a serrated knife. And you should be able to hear this pretty clearly. And there's bread crust flying everywhere. So yeah, when you've got to the point where look at that, nice looking interior, nicely aerated, nice crispy exterior. Wonderful.